Hey, welcome back to the Preacher's Kid podcast. I'm Jon
What's
Groves,
up?
and I'm here with my co-host Eli Blevins. What's up, Eli? How you doing?
That's me. What's up? What's up, John? How are you?
You know
Doing
what?
all right?
I'm just living the dream, 100%.
Living. I like it. The dream is good. The dream's alive.
The dream is sometimes a nightmare, someone else's dream, but it's a dream nonetheless. And so I'm just excited to be here. What's
That's
what
right. That's
what is
right.
life
Dream
like
on.
in December in Wilmington, North Carolina?
So right now it's about 55 degrees.
Hmm.
Fun fact: when I was in second grade, I watched the Weather Channel as the only channel I could really, not only that I could watch, the only one I really wanted to watch.
Come on.
So me being able to share about the weather right now is a dream of mine. So we got a nice little crisp 55 degrees. We have still some orange leaves on the trees right now, and it is beautiful outside. I am not a cold weather fan, but I can do 55
No.
degrees. And it's really weird because we're such a vacation town. So we'll see like a spike in our people from like end of March until like September. So like right now, it's like the real ones are here. Like the
Yes.
real locals are here. Like we don't have all the tourists here, and so like you can make it to your house in under 15 minutes. Kind of traffic.
Legendary.
So yeah, it's good. But no, Wilmington here is good. How about you? What's it like over there?
You know what? I am in San Antonio, Texas, and yesterday it was a balmy 75 degrees, and I went outside in shorts and mowed the grass in December. That was crazy.
Nice. Now, is it
Yeah.
mow the grass or mow the lawn or cut the grass? Like, I heard someone say, "What do you mean by mowing?" And I was like, "What do you mean by like where you take the like lawnmower and go?" And they're like, "Oh, we call it cutting the grass where I'm from." And I was like,
Oh my
"You're
gosh.
weird."
They
No,
were
you're just
probably
weird.
from like way up north or something like that.
I know where they call soda pop and stuff like that.
That's just weird. It's soda, it's not pop, okay?
And if it's not a soda, it's just like a Coke. Coke
Right.
is Sprite. Coke is everything. But it's sweet
Exactly.
tea, though. I mean, like now, if you don't know about sweet tea, God, in the words of a Southerner, God bless.
God bless your heart. And listen, to all of our friends listening up in the north or maybe in some other countries, it is not acceptable to offer unsweet tea and then say that there is sugar on the table. Sugar does not dissolve in cold tea. I'm really passionate about that. I'm sorry to get so worked up about.
No,
I'm just,
so Thanksgiving, I had a tragedy happen in our family, and it was someone accidentally brought three unsweet teas, and
oh
there was no
no.
sweet tea there. And I was actually in South Carolina for this, and so I had to take a moment. And the thing is, I did not drink sweet tea from the first day of November, and I was going to break that. Like it wasn't really a fast, but whatever it is. I was gonna break my sweet tea addiction on
Hmm.
Thanksgiving. I get there and there's unsweet tea. It was like the Lord was telling me, "You're not done yet. Like
Wow.
your time's not up." So sometimes you just gotta follow the spirit on that one.
You know what? You're so spiritual. I want to be like you when I grow up,
Yeah, he
fasting from
says
sweet tea.
Jesus says, "Go to the well." He's the well. Like he'll give you the
Mm.
everlasting water. You'll never run dry with
Yes.
him. But I was
Yes,
running dry
amen.
on sweet. I was running dry on sweet tea. So
I read in the book of Psalms where it said that
mm,
God's word was sweeter than the honeycomb, which means
mm.
God is not a fan of unsweet tea.
Nope, 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 nope. He talked. I mean, the Lord's a good God. Why would He want us to have that's
Exactly.
man-made. Sweet tea is from God. Unsweet tea is man-made. It's like
Right.
one of those things. So
And I don't need any of that in my life. Come on. And for those that are judgy and are getting ready to tweet us and say it's pronounced Psalms, not Psalms, y'all can leave me alone. All right.
yeah,
Just stay in your own lane. All right. That's how I'm gonna
there's
pronounce it from now on.
was there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was there like a kids show, Salties, that was like with a P growing up? Like, is that a thing, or am I just having a weird nightmare right
Yeah,
now?
there was. I think it was something to do with like it was like a Christian thing though.
Of
Um,
course it was. Yeah.
yeah, I think he was like a character that like helped you learn the
Yeah.
scripture or something.
Yes.
I want
You
to
are a
say
pastor's kid if you know that.
I want to say it was like Masters Club or Awana or something like that. It was like yeah,
I
it was
don't
one of
even know. It's just somewhere deep in my memory bank that there is a salty spelled like Psalty. Like I don't know. I'm having weird
Yes.
flashbacks to kindergarten here.
That was back before salty became a negative adjective to describe people. Back then, salty was a real hero. Back in the days of
Yeah.
Bible Man, somebody say amen.
Salty is not like what the Northerners are feeling right now after hearing us talk about sweet tea and unsweet tea.
No. And before we lose half of our audience, we should dive into today's material.
Yes.
So, we are not only speaking to preachers' kids, we're speaking to parents of preachers' kids, but as two PKs who have been in ministry basically our entire lives and now serve
Yep.
in ministry of our own free will, which takes a
Yep.
lot of people by surprise, we have some perspective and some things that we want to share. And we think this is going to be a help to anybody and everybody who's listening. But
Oh yeah.
today, our episode specifically is kind of from a kid's perspective back to their ministry leader parents. Lifeway did a survey, and they came up with the top 4 questions that ministry parents, preachers, pastors, evangelists, missionaries were asking about their kids. And so we thought,
Yep.
who better to answer these questions than actual preachers' kids? And
That's
so Eli,
me.
I want to dive into it because the
Yep.
first one, I mean, it's a deep question. Parents are
What is it?
asking. They're asking, should I protect my kids from church conflict? Because pastors deal with a
Wow.
lot of church conflict. Should they shield their kids from it or should they shove them right into it? Is there a happy medium? On your mark, get set, go.
There's a happy. Is there such thing as an unhappy medium? like,
I don't know.
I think. Okay, so now that I'm 26 years old and I'm in ministry, and I am still very young and in ministry, like, but my parents didn't necessarily shield me from conflict. They didn't gossip about it, like by any means. That's not what I'm trying to say. But they did let me in on, like if they were struggling with something, like, hey, like this is hard, this is kind of what happened, this is kind of like went down, and they did it all without being like gossipy about it. Now at 26 years old and working in ministry, I think knowing those ahead of time and still being like, I still want to do that and I still want to pursue the local church. I think for me now, I have a greater appreciation that they did do that,
Yes.
because now I'm like, nothing really surprises me anymore. And it's not that I like would lose trust with people at all. I will trust you until you stab me in my back, and even then I'll have to prove that you stabbed me in my back to like make me lose your trust. But I think because they would let me in, not in the deep way, but they would just be like, hey, like this kind of stinks. It is what it is. I think it allowed me from a young age to start kind of, I don't know, understanding some of the inside
Yes.
stuff as well. They did it so well though, to where it was almost like it wasn't even, because we just talk church stuff a lot, like, and I think they talked about so much of the good stuff though as well. So I didn't just hear from the perspective of, oh, this stunk. Like I heard from perspective of like, we celebrate first, and
Hmm.
then like we talk about what's going on. And it's kind of like the sandwich. Have you ever had like, you have like compliment or something good, some kind of maybe a little negative, and then like on the bottom half of the sandwich is like another compliment or something good. Like
Hmm.
that's kind of what my like life looked like in a nutshell. We celebrate, hoorah. This was, these kind of people kind of rubbed us wrong. Like there's, something like that. But oh my gosh, like whatever this person is, or, outshines it all. And so I kind of had that experience. So it's a happy medium for sure. It definitely wasn't never like super in depth. But it definitely also wasn't, like they weren't shielding me. So yeah, what about you? How did your parents do with you on that?
I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said it doesn't have to be super in depth, but enough for your kids to have a perspective. Because if you are in ministry or you've been to church more than one time, you know that one of the biggest complaints in the church world is gossip. People do
Yep.
it, people gossip. And so your kid is going to either hear your perspective or someone else's, but they're not going to be kept in the dark because people talk. And so
Yep.
it's better from a PK's perspective. My You grew up in a really positive environment. I kind of grew up in the opposite, where my family would do their best to like pretend like none of these things existed and they didn't, talk about those types of things. But I
Yeah.
always knew what was going on. One, because they would talk about those things after I went to bed, but I was not asleep. I heard everything they
And
said.
you're like, your ears stuck up to the wall, like, oh, yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
But like all the deacons kids, trustees kids, I mean the kids who rode the bus to church, they all were telling me what their parents were saying about my family or that situation when they went home. So I was hearing about it anyway, and it would have been better to have heard a positive approach, or at
Mm-hmm.
least just the cold hard truth from my parents. But I do
Yep.
think that it's important for pastors to remember that your kids are not your associate pastors.
Right.
They are not pawns in a game to get information or to disseminate information, but they are strategic leaders in your ministry. So
Oh, yeah.
please don't use them, but and don't abuse that position, but do understand that they need to know what's going on, especially if you want to keep them in your family ministry for very long. So I agree with you, man.
Right.
It's got to be a happy medium somewhere in the middle.
For sure. And I think so often, I think that we, as kids, because I think we see even like pop culture, I think Disney and all these shows, they make the kids seem like their lives are separate than like parents. And the
Yes.
parents, there's always a struggle. If you watch any Disney show or anything like that, it's always the parents are so out of touch with the kids and the kids are so out of touch with their parents. I
Right.
think by them doing that, it kind of bridged that gap. So when you're sitting there now, when you're watching Disney Plus or whatever you're watching, and you see these, family sitcoms, it wasn't really my reality because I never really saw like, oh, this is happening, or they were, staying up late and doing this. I was like, that I was just let in on the world, and I wasn't let in
Yes.
on 10 out of 10. Like I wasn't let out, like in the deepest, darkest things, but I was still like, they made me feel like I was heard, and I heard them as well, and so it was really healthy. And so I think for so many of my other friends who have parents and other, whatever their work is, I could feel like they would even bring like their parents' stress to school sometimes, like
Absolutely.
especially if they're dealing with like finances or something like that. But I heard like so many positive things about what my mom and dad's job was that I was like, I felt like I had so much confidence in life because I heard them talk about confidence and so many good things about their job, and it does trickle down.
Hmm.
I mean, your kid. I
Absolutely.
mean, like I said, you are the kid's biggest role model, so like you do get to. I mean, whether you like it or not, and so you do have a great voice, and so church conflict, it happens every single day. Now I'm in
Hmm.
a church and I see way more than I would have even thought. But at the same time though, it's like I know that we're doing this for the Lord. We're doing this to reach a city, and like if there's conflict, like that's okay, but our vision is still the same, and that's to show people there's more to life in Christ, and that's our church vision. But I just know if we keep that in mind, like you'll be good, and make sure your kids know that as well. Like they have to be reminded of that.
Absolutely. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit later in the episode about how in ministry you don't have the luxury of leaving your job at the office, at least not in the sense that an accountant or a chef or somebody else would. It is different in ministry, but it is important to go home and be a parent and not go
Mhm.
home and be a pastor, which kind of leads us into the next big question that Lifeway uncovered from their polling of pastors. A big
Yep.
one was pastors were asking, how should I shepherd my kids at home? Because they're
Hmm.
pastor to all of these other people, and we know that people look at their pastors probably unconsciously as this higher standard. You've got deeper biblical insight. I'm coming to you for advice. But when you're the
Hmm.
pastor's kid, you know who they are when they walk off the platform. You know what they're like in bad traffic. You know what they're
Hmm.
like at family Thanksgiving. And so pastors are trying to figure out, I don't want to be pastor to my kids, but I also do need to pastor my kids. How
Hmm.
do I do both? And I think your parents did a great job. Tell us about how they made that connection.
Gosh, I've never really thought about it until then. I just kind of, it's weird. If you ever had, it's like you just live it. Like you don't know how to explain it. You've just lived it.
Yeah.
And so they did, they just did such a good, just such a great of keeping always the main thing. And to them, it was like they wanted much fun in life. as possible. So if we're doing anything as a family, which we always had family stuff going on, like we were just always doing stuff, it was a party. It was a competition. It was a party, and we're bringing other people along for the ride. And so I think I was just like, maybe a little bit. I was a little skewed in the way I was growing up because I just thought church is always just one big party. So kind of going back to the other question of conflict, like I just always thought everything was good. Everything in church was probably really
That's
good with
awesome.
some negative stuff thrown with some like negative stuff like thrown in there, like I knew about for sure. But then like I get to these things like everyone loves my parents, like this is how it is, and then you'd hear something like a month later. Then you hear something like a month later, and like I would take offense for them. So like if I heard something like you would were saying like you heard people talking about it and like I would take offense to that. Like I'd be like, no, those are my daddy's bigger than your daddy. Like kind of like,
Right.
I'd kind of puff my shoulders up and like get ready to go at them. And but no, they made sure family was number one and number two and number three, apart from God. Someone out there is getting out there like, their theology. Jesus should be number one, da, 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 da. I saw them that I carry today. I saw them value each other first, God first, then each other, made sure their marriage was good, and then us as well. And for me, like being able to see mom and dad just love each other and have so much fun in life and never yelling at each other, for a kid growing up in that, like I feel like I grew up in like Disney World sometimes with that. Like it was just awesome. But they made sure that me and my sister Bailey, that we were just such high priorities. If there was a game, they were going to either coach it or they were going to be there.
Mm,
And so
that's
they
awesome.
shepherd us. It's a little weird, admittedly, like sharing your parents with 500 other people.
Right.
Not many other jobs have that where like your parents are up by other people. Like that part is weird, and it's still a little weird. It's like sometimes I'm not Eli, sometimes I'm still Pastor Tim's son,
Right.
um, and which is like fine. I am that. I am more than that, but I think it was a little weird just like sharing your parents with stuff, and you're going to restaurants and they're getting, I say recognized, but that sounds so like celebritized, but like
Right.
you'd see people around, and like that was a little weird, but we were just such a priority that I was just like, this is normal, this is fun. It was weird, but it was what it was. So yeah, what about you from your end? I don't know if I answered the question right, but they kept us number one. Like they just kept
Yeah.
my dad kept the family number one. So
Well, you pointed out something interesting. You talked about the restaurant experience. So
yeah,
what the first thing, and now that we're in ministry, we do it too. But the first thing that our dads would do when they walked into a restaurant is do a quick look around to see if any of the church people were there, right? Because
undoubtedly.
when you are the past, you don't get to just pretend like those people aren't there and go sit down and go about your day. You're expected to go and make a connection. Like,
Yep.
hey, it's good to see you. You're expected to know their name or at least remember seeing them at church or not seeing them at church. There's all kinds of things you're
Yep.
supposed to remember. So
Oh
when
yeah.
our families walked into a public place, we did the scan anticipating that we were going to see someone that we knew and we were going to be happy about it, regardless of who they were.
Yep.
I would say that shepherding your kids at home looks a lot like treating your kids like you treat going into a public place. When you walk through the
Yep.
door and your preacher's kid who has been sharing you with, after hours counseling, after hours phone calls, weird
Yep.
appointments and hospital visits. When you walk through the door, look for your kids in the living room and in their bedroom with the same anticipation and joy that you look for a congregant in the local
Yep.
restaurant. And your kids will feed off of that energy because Pastor
Mm-hmm.
Robbie Gallaty, who pastors Long Hollow in Hendersonville, Tennessee, he is big on discipleship, and he always says, "Hey, pastor, your family is your most important discipleship group." And
Yep.
that is so true. And you got to see from a really positive perspective how that your parents involved you in things and they did life with their family and made that a priority over other people. And
Right.
when your family is healthy, then your church family can also be healthy. But if you're
Mhm.
losing in one, you're losing in the other undoubtedly. And at the end of the day, your family is your most important discipleship group. So to the
Yep.
pastor who's wondering like how do I pastor my kids? Well, number 1, recognize that you're dad first or mom first and pastor second, but disciple them, be in the word, and make prayer something that you do fervently around the dinner table or the living room or the bedroom, and not just something you do from the platform. And then
Right.
also realize that every human being is looking for a confidant, right? And
Yep.
for most people, that's their pastor. But for your kid, that might be difficult for them to connect with you in that way,
Yep.
especially if you're hearing this and you're going, I've got some things I need to correct. I haven't been doing this right for very long. So
Mhm.
share other pastors on staff or other pastor friends that you know, or just godly, wise people in your church that you trust. Share them with your kids. And
Yep.
don't be intimidated when your kid has a youth pastor that they really rely on, because if you
Yeah.
trust them, the most important thing is seeing your kid raised up and discipled in the best way possible.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head there. It's just I think the most simplest thing, if you're a parent and you're listening to this, or you're going to be a parent, or involve them is the first thing. Just involve them in everything that's going on. Don't shield them. You can, like I said, explain things on the surface level, but involve them and make them feel like they are just as much a part of building the church as you are. I
Absolutely.
remember missing a practice once because I was going door to door handing out invites to our first ever church service
Amazing.
when I was like 9 years old. And I remember that moment distinctly. And I think then in the moment, I was probably just like, whatever, like, this stinks. I want to go to soccer practice. But what it did is it allowed them to have, it was a very, I guess, building block for me working in the church or doing ministry. Like, that was my kind of first thing. Because I think he also brought me like on some of those trips because they're like, we're not gonna, cuss out a guy who's bringing his kid along with him. Like, no, we're not going to your stupid church kind of thing.
Yes.
So I think I was like an easy buffer. It's like when you're like walking a dog, like everyone wants to come like pet the dog. I think I was like kind of like the mascot kind of thing.
Come on.
But I was just involved. Like they just let me do stuff, and sometimes I didn't even know it was for my own good. And now 14, 15 years later, I'm like, that was for my good. Like, my parents knew a
Yeah.
thing or two about a thing or two.
Yeah.
But I also had, amazing pastors in my life. I had amazing people who I could look up to. Admittedly, probably at times, not all times. It was probably sometimes hard though for me to like go to them, like if I was struggling with stuff or if like I had any questions or something like that, just because I think one of them, I just thought I didn't want to be a burden to him, like because I just hear him, oh, we're in
Mm,
another meeting, we got this going on, and so like I would go to a youth pastor, I'd go to someone else who I trusted and that was around, and which is fine. Like, but by the way, if you're in a church setting right now, like your youth pastor, like make sure that you have the like right one in place,
yes.
um, because that's important because your kids will look up to them, and so I was able to look up to mine though, and just ask questions and hang around them and naturally kind of conversation flows, and so that part was really good. But I guess a negative was like I didn't always feel like I, not from their end but from my end, I didn't want to be like a burden to them, and so like I would kind
Right.
of shield probably more than I should have. And not that I was like doing anything bad, but just like had a hard day kind of thing. And so yeah, I think I could have done a better job like on the other side, like going to them as well for to be a confidant on some things, but honestly, like that's just such a very small fraction of the time, anyway. So,
Right.
yeah,
To the
but
preacher's kids that are listening, I don't know, you're probably in one of two scenarios. One, your parents have done this really well and you're like Eli and you don't want to be a burden. Or two, your pastor parents haven't handled this the best and you don't want to talk to them. Both groups of kids are in a cycle that somebody has to break. And so as the
yep,
preacher's kid, break the cycle. Maybe the reason why your parents are bugging you with questions and maybe even passive aggressive things all the time
Mm-hmm.
is because they want to know information. They want to be trusted, whether they,
Yep.
deserve to be or not from your perspective. And for those that aren't watching the video, that was a big air quotes in deserve.
Yep.
But um, for those that are like, oh, I don't want to be a burden, let me also speak from the parent side and say your parents want to hear from you, and you don't have to give them every detail that maybe you're
Right.
talking to a youth pastor or a discipler about, but just trusting them with bits and pieces, little things here and there that are random, that are unrequested from their side, is going to cause them to trust you so much more. And it's going to
Mm-hmm.
cause you to respect and learn from and fall in love with them so much more as well.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Amen. Yeah. And I think that you can be in one and two camps, but you can also come in and out of both those camps at the same time too. Just like with the
Absolutely.
rhythms of life or seasons of life. Um, by the way, I think I hear the word seasons of life only in the Christian context. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe in your
Just in
season
a
of life, like
season where,
it just yeah, it just looks different. And so I would encourage you guys, don't feel like you have lost your parents to
yes.
work or to church because of that. Um, Parents, don't make your kids have a reason to feel that way either. It's
Boom.
like, I mean, just don't. And if you're listening to this and you are not a pastor's kid, or you are not, a pastor, whatever it is in your life that you're in, maybe you just are a Christian. Um, and you are either a kid, or I say kid, or a parent, just don't understand seasons are seasons, but don't let seasons be a lifetime of something. So
Yes.
like, yeah, there can be hard times, but like it doesn't have to be hard always. Like the Warriors, the basketball team, they had 4 years of like a dynasty, and now they are terrible, like because that's how seasons go. Like you do,
Yep,
like some are
you're right.
really good, and now some like some aren't. And so I mean, I don't know. I don't want to get too preachy about it, but it's just important not to bring. And I think you touched on it. It's important not to bring church work home, but it's important to bring the spirit of the church home.
Yes.
Um, and so you don't have to make your kids feel like a burden for doing that. No, you get to be a part of this. Like, you are a blessing to us, and we want to know about your life. Um, and then again, like, teens are teens, so like I feel like they're gonna not want to share their parents anyways. But
Right.
like, you just have a unique opportunity to do so. And yeah, you can fall in one, two camps, or even a hybrid camp there. And maybe you're not even a Christian. You're just listening to this. Like, seasons are seasons. Just don't let them be everything. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
I I think it's important for every pastor to know that if you will nail this at home, like if you learn how to lead your family well, you can translate all of those principles back into the church world. If your home is a fun, exciting, organized, happy, whatever type of a place, your church will be that too. But if your home
Yeah.
is messed up, like pastors are wondering, why don't my people talk to me? Why don't they trust me? I'm like, news alert, your kids don't either, probably.
Right.
This is if you'll nail it at home, you'll be able to take it to church, which is why the number three question a lot of pastors are asking, according to Lifeway, how often should we make our kids go to church? And
Hmm.
that's a deep one. I think we may be on the same wavelength with this question, but I want to toss it
Hmm.
to you because you shared your basketball practice story. How often should a pastor make their kids go to church?
Um, that's a tricky question because I was always in church.
Yep.
I guess I was made to go to church, but also all my friends were in church, so it was like I really wanted to go to church. But then there were times where I was forced to go to church, and I think I had a worse attitude about it, and then it
Mm,
showed up at church that I was upset at something, or my parents. And so because I have a tendency, I can go negative like real quick, and I can kind of like do that, especially as a kid. And so, I could make that like really hard for them. So like, don't force your kids to go to church. Um, Invite them along though,
yes.
to do so. But I just don't say, just don't. don't maybe force them, but like it's important to know that church is what we do. Um, my parents had a saying, and every time I'd leave the house, they would say this, and I promise you this will tie into it. But they would look at me and they would say, "You know who you are. You are a Blevins." And I knew that
Yes.
because I was a, I knew that because I was a Blevins, I was held to a different standard. So we did go to church. We were there when the doors were opened, partly because we had keys to it, but like we were there for that stuff. And so like, and but I knew from the time I could, remember hearing, I was a Blevins and I was, different. Like, and not in an arrogant way, not in like a self-righteous like, well, we're better, but no, like this is who we are, this is what we do. Other
Mm,
kids may have this, but also they don't, their dad's work, you don't have friends that their your friends don't have friends that your dad's work and you do, so like you have a one up there on them for that. And so I kind of had, it was unique, but I was there a lot. I was there a lot,
yes.
and probably like more than I, not maybe more than I should have, but like there were times where I was probably forced to be there. And at the same time though, kids like, if you can't drive, you don't really get a decision.
Come on.
Like you just do it. Are you paying the bills? No, then you should probably listen to your parents. So
You just hit
yeah,
on so many things that I resonated with. Uh, Before we got out of the car, our question or statement was, don't forget who you are. And so, same. Because, and to the preacher's kids, I don't want you to let this go to your head. I just want you to consider the weight of who you are. You are a member of the first family. Like the royal family, the president's family, whatever. As far as your
yeah,
church is concerned, you're a member of the first family, and what you do actually biblically has a consequence in your parents' ministry. So
mm-hmm.
their success kind of rises and falls on you as well.
Yeah,
That's important. Don't take that for granted, but understand that people are looking at you and you
yeah,
have an important job as a preacher's kid. So parents, don't forget that your kids are an important part of your ministry. So should I make them go? Well, for the preacher's kid that's listening that thinks that they have it bad, let me share like a 60-second version of my testimony. I grew up independent, fundamental, Bible believing, King James only, bless God better than you Baptist. Okay. We were
yeah.
all those
How are
things
you,
and
Mom?
more. Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm not that anymore, which you can probably tell. But I was there every time the doors were open. So Sunday morning, I was there. And I actually became the music leader at our church when I was 12 years old because a church split, piano player leaves the church. It became my
Yeah.
job. Yeah. So
Next man up.
yes. So Sunday mornings, every Sunday morning, I was at church by like 8 a.m. To help set up the church building to make sure everything was in order. And
Oh, you
then,
got to sleep in. I'm 6 a.m. Man.
dude, well, y'all have those multiple services and everything. We just had one big building. Um, so we w- be there by 8, set everything up. 10 o'clock Sunday school, 11 o'clock church, then lunch with some church people, and then back for choir practice at 5 o'clock, evening service at 6, and then Tuesday night was Bible Institute, Wednesday night was choir practice, and then an evening service, and then Thursday night was hospital visitations, and then Friday night was Reformers Unanimous program at the church. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. men's prayer, Saturday afternoon, door to door visitation. And we did that every single week. If church was on Christmas, we were there, like
Oh yeah.
we're there for all the
What gift?
things.
What kind of gifts? There's no better gift than the birth of Jesus. So like you don't
Come
need to
on.
open up gifts.
Exact.
The Jesus gave his son to us. Like that's a gift.
The
Why
least we
skip for
could
Christmas?
do is give him an hour on Sunday morning and our tithes. Don't forget your tithes, ladies and gentlemen. That's um
I no, I'm not going there.
we
Never.
won't even touch it. We won't even touch it. So yeah, I was there all the time and I had to be a part of everything. And I had to sacrifice, you know, athletic opportunity type things. I had to sacrifice, like even some employment type things because we had to be at church. And because it was made to be this obligation, it was a duty rather than a privilege. I hated it. So
Yeah.
to the parent, I would say if you will raise a family when they're young that loves to serve together, if you will make a family ministry, then your kids will love it and they will choose to be a part of it. But as they get older and they're able to drive and they have other opportunities, please do not make them be at every single function that, and pastors, you
Mm-mm.
don't need to be at every single function that the church is hosting.
Now
If
that's
if
facts.
if you are the fulcrum on which everything hinges, I don't know if that was the right thing. If everything hinges on you, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And
Cheers.
if
How are
you're
you empowering if you're at everything?
exactly, you're not,
Yeah.
and your kids are going to feel that way, your staff is going to feel that way. So I agree, when they're little kids, teach them the importance of being involved and involve them, invite them along the journey. Who knows, they may choose, like Eli and I, to be in ministry when they
Yep.
grow up. But if you make it an obligation and a negative duty and you hold it over their heads and they have to sacrifice every semblance of childhood because of your agenda, they're going to hate ministry. They're going to hate you. And they're going to be one of the overwhelming statistic of PKs that turn to addiction, atheism, homosexuality, and the like as a band-aid for the deep spiritual and family wounds that they have
Yep.
that you helped inflict. I know that
I
was
think
hard.
it, it, it is it is hard. I mean, there's no there's probably not a perfect answer. I think there's just a hybrid of answers to this.
Absolutely.
Um, and for kids though, like, and by the way, when we say kids, we're speaking at it in like you're not the parent in this situation. Like,
Right.
even, whether you're 20 years old or not, like
Right.
that's what we're talking about. But you have a choice, so you have an attitude. Attitude's a choice. Like, how is your spirit like going to be towards this? Like, are you going to be joyful or are you going to be bitter? Like, that's kind of your two choices that you have. Um, and maybe your family situation looks even different than mine or John's does, or I think just having an attitude though of doing it. And when you get a car, like when you are 16, or for those of you who are driving and whatnot, like you don't have to go to don't feel like you have to go to everything either. Like, live a life, have a good life. I'm obviously responsibly, not being an idiot, but like, you don't feel like you have to. And I think because I didn't feel that way, I wanted to keep coming back. Like, I wanted to come. Like whenever your parents say like you can't do it, you want to do it even more.
Right.
Like, I remember one time it was a Wednesday night service that we had. Shout out to the Wednesday night services
Come
if
on.
those are still a
Prayer
thing
meeting.
places. And they were like, "Don't come. You need to just stay home and rest." And I was like, "No, I'm not gonna stay home. I'm gonna come do this. Like, you
Right.
can't tell me no to this." So it was almost like I was rebelling, and like I think it was kind of like their psychological way of doing it, like because they're geniuses. But I just remember one time it's like, I had a car, like, you're just like, they're like, just stay home. You don't need to come to it. And I was like, no, you bet I'm gonna come to this. Like, and
Come
this is
on.
what's gonna happen. I'm gonna come. It's gonna be fun. And so, like, you won't like it. It's not even gonna be fun. I'm like, oh, I'm still coming. You just help.
I'm gonna make it
So I
fun.
think there, yeah. So I think there's some times of that too, and have fun with it. My gosh, don't take everything so seriously. Like, please don't take church more seriously than you take your family and your
Absolutely.
friends. Like, just, and I think when we realize that the church, the institution of the church, is meant to reach a city, like your kids are in that city, your brothers and sisters are in that city, like everyone's included in that circle. So,
Yes.
I mean, you can't reach a city if you can't reach your family. I mean,
Come on.
just, I mean, is what it is. But yeah, I keep going these like little tangents. I'm passionate about, and I'm passionate about family dynamics and church that plays out, and because I came from an overly positive one, um, it made it kind of, it's probably very different than other people's. So don't think that my story has to be your story either. But I think if everyone has a choice though, and you can choose to make that choice on, your attitude towards church. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
So the last question, and I think we could just both give a bullet point answer because we've covered so much ground that relates to this. So, what would your bullet point answer be to the final Lifewood question? How can I keep my kids from hating the church?
Bullet points are fun. Have fun. Don't be such a suit and tie kind of person that you can't have fun. Um, yeah. Don't make your kids, you know, do think I don't know. Just have fun with it. Just please have fun. I had so much fun. I'm still having fun. I hope my kids have fun because sorry, they're gonna be pastors' kids too. So hopefully they get to hear this one day and this is kind of like my diary to my kids.
Yes.
So
Shout out to the future Blevins and Groves kids.
oh
You've
my
got a lot coming
gosh.
your way.
I cannot wait for the future quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. He's going to be listening to this, young Eli Blevins Jr.
Jason Garrett will still be the coach, and he'll still be clapping like he's in a church choir.
We're done with this conversation.
Oh, come on.
uh,
Um, and I agree with your bullet point answer, 100%. I believe that the greatest, easiest way to keep your kids from hating the church, and I'm not just talking about the place, I'm talking about the people. The best way to keep them from hating the concept of church is to have fun, to take everyday things that might seem monotonous and make them enjoyable and involve them, disciple them,
yep.
and choose to make it a good time, which
Yep.
leads us right into our closing segment. Eli and I were talking about a way that we wanted to close every episode. And for the duration, we want to talk about you might be a preacher's kid if, like you've heard Jeff Foxworthy, you might be a redneck if, and there are so many things that only preacher's kids understand. And Eli
Yep.
had a great one this week. Share that with us.
You might be a preacher's kid if you got to drink all the communion afterwards because it was grape juice.
Yes.
And yeah, we had competitions in our family who could drink the most leftover grape juice communions and eat the bread as well. So
Yes.
yeah, that was fun.
So my favorite part of communion services was those ushers would tote all of those trays with the communion cups up to the church kitchen. My grandpa and my dad and I would go in there, and my grandpa was a big John Wayne movie fan, like old westerns and stuff like that.
Oh,
We
nice.
would pretend like those things were shot glasses. I know we didn't even believe in alcohol, but we would pretend like they were shot glasses and compete to see who could throw back the most. And
Yep.
we had a lady in one of our churches that made the communion bread from scratch, and
Oh, boots.
it was so good. And so, like, I would always ask her to make
Yeah.
me like a couple extra plates of it, and I would just snack on it. Like, communion times were the best, like throwing back the shot glasses.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I spilled some grape juice once and that was fun. You had to clean up the purple stain. By the way, who thought giving kids like grape juice and thinking they're not gonna spill it?
Come
Like
on.
speak like Christmas services with like the candles. Like I'm terrified of
Mhm.
kids and candles. Like, yeah,
Me
that's just
too.
not a good. Someone's gonna get burned. There's gonna be grape juice spilled. But I remember like we had communion on Sunday mornings and I was just like, I'm not going to be hungry during service because I get communion. Like I'm gonna eat all the leftover bread, and it's gonna be awesome. So, but
I
yeah,
don't know if
communion.
I don't know if any other PKs out there have the perspective that we do, but because we're PKs, we borderline on perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, pastors out there, and your kids will agree, do not have the ushers or whatever collect the empty little plastic cups till the service is over, because we're trying to pray and all we hear is tink, 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 tink.
Yep.
Like, just stop it. It can wait. We will go pick them up after the service if you will just leave it alone.
Yes.
Man, I don't
And
know where that came from. That was a lot of passion about those communion cups, and
yeah,
it got me.
you've been having a little too much real communion in there.
We didn't have
His was
having too much real
fine,
communion back
everybody.
here in the studio.
His was
Oh my God.
fine. Mine was Welch's grape juice. By the way, shout out to our sponsor, Welch's grape juice today for what am I talking about?
Thank you so much, Welch's 100% grape juice and the Communion Cracker Company of 1968. We still have our original boxes. We still haven't used all those jokers. They're sitting in the church supply room.
By the way, church communion bread that we used was made in 1968. I'm pretty sure because they taste like cardboard.
Yes, it was so gross. Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us on this week's episode of The Preacher's Kid. And we want to invite you to check the show notes, find us on social media, join our Facebook community. Most of all, send us in your communion story. If you have a PK communion story, send it in. Or if you have a question that you want us to talk about on the Preacher's Kid podcast, all questions will remain anonymous, so you don't have to worry about your parents finding out that you're the one who asked it, because we know how that is. Send it
Mhm.
in to us, and Eli and I would love to talk about that here on the show.
Yep.
And we can't wait to see you next month right here on The Preacher's Kid.
That's right. And go Cowboys.